The courtroom was silent except for the steady tapping of the judge's gavel. In front of him stood Samuel Carter, a tall, confident black man dressed in a sharp black suit. His eyes remained calm, but his heart raced. He was no ordinary man. In fact, he was the director of the FBI, the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the United States. Yet in this moment, he stood accused by a judge who had no idea of his true identity, Judge Raymond Locke. An older man with a stern face and deep-seated biases, had built a reputation for being unforgiving, especially to those he believed did not belong in positions of power. His voice echoed through the courtroom, dripping with disdain. "Samuel Carter," Judge Locke sneered, narrowing his eyes. "You are nothing more than a fraud. A charlatan playing dress-up, trying to deceive this court into thinking you have any real value. You don't belong here. You don't even belong in this country." A murmur spread through the courtroom, but Samuel remained still, his face unreadable. He had spent his life being underestimated, judged by the color of his skin rather than his capabilities. He had proven his doubters wrong, rising through the ranks and defying expectations. But today was different. The stakes were higher than they had ever been. His reputation, his career, and his life were all on the line. Samuel finally spoke, his voice steady and powerful. "Your Honor, I don't think you understand who you're speaking to." Judge Locke chuckled, amused by the boldness of the man before him. "Oh, I understand perfectly well. You think you can fool me, but I've seen men like you come and go. You're no different." Samuel straightened his back and met the judge's gaze with unwavering confidence. "What you don't know," he said, his voice rising, "is that I hold the highest position in the FBI. I am the director. You are in my world now, not the other way around." A stunned silence fell over the room. The judge's face turned pale, his arrogance faltering as the weight of Samuel's words hit him like a ton of bricks. But just as quickly, he recovered. "Nice try," he muttered, attempting to laugh off the shock. "But I don't buy it." At that moment, a sharp knock on the door interrupted the tense exchange. A man in a suit entered, holding a sealed envelope. Without a word, he approached the judge and handed him the letter. Judge Locke's hands trembled slightly as he tore it open and scanned its contents. His eyes widened in disbelief. The man in the suit spoke. "Sir, the information in this letter is confirmed. Samuel Carter is indeed the director of the FBI." Judge Locke's face went ashen. He looked at Samuel, his expression now a mix of fear and regret. What do you want from me?" he stammered, his arrogance now completely gone. Samuel smiled. "I want nothing from you, Your Honor. But I'm about to make sure you understand that you never mess with the wrong person again." The judge opened his mouth to speak, but Samuel held up a hand, silencing him. The power had shifted. Samuel had the upper hand now. The entire courtroom watched in stunned silence, the tension thick in the air. But just as it seemed that Samuel had won, something unexpected happened. The courtroom doors slammed open, and several armed men in black suits stormed in, their guns drawn. They moved quickly, surrounding Samuel with military precision. The room erupted in chaos as the judge's previous arrogance transformed into confusion. The armed men weren't here for him. They were here for Samuel. The man who was supposed to be untouchable was now the target of a much larger threat than he had ever anticipated. As the men moved toward him, Samuel's mind raced. He had no idea who these people were, but they weren't here for any ordinary reason. Someone powerful had orchestrated this. Someone who wanted him gone by any means necessary. "Move!" one of the armed men shouted, his voice cold and commanding. Samuel didn't hesitate. He dove to the side, narrowly avoiding a gunshot. The courtroom descended into chaos as people screamed and tried to flee. But Samuel was already in motion, his FBI training kicking in as he assessed the situation. He couldn't let them take him. Not now. Not after everything he had worked for. He had to fight back. But just as he started to make his move, the unthinkable happened. Judge Locke, who had moments before been humiliated by Samuel, suddenly grabbed a hidden firearm from beneath the bench and aimed it at him. The judge's finger twitched on the trigger, and everything went black. When Samuel regained consciousness, everything felt wrong. His head throbbed, and his body ached as if he had been hit by a truck. The dim light above him flickered, casting long shadows across the unfamiliar room. His vision was blurry, but he could make out the shape of a metal chair in front of him. He blinked, trying to clear his mind, but his hands were bound tightly to the arms of the chair. His heart raced as panic began to set in. Where was he? For a moment, he thought the whole thing had been a nightmare, but the cold steel around his wrists reminded him that this was real. He took a deep breath. Focus. Analyze the situation. There was no time to waste. The last thing he remembered was Judge Locke pointing a gun at him. Had the judge fired? Was he injured? He felt his body. Nothing seemed broken, but there was a sharp pain in his side. He hadn't imagined it. He had been shot. His mind raced. Who had saved him? And who were those men who stormed into the courtroom? A door creaked open behind him, and Samuel's muscles tensed. He didn't have to wait long before he heard footsteps approaching. He couldn't let them see him unprepared. Slowly, he shifted in the chair, trying to loosen his bonds without making a sound. The footsteps stopped, and a deep voice broke the silence. Well, look who's awake." Samuel felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't recognize the voice, but the tone sent a message loud and clear. This wasn't going to be easy. "Who are you?" Samuel demanded, his voice stronger than he felt. "What do you want from me?" A man in a black suit stepped into his line of sight. He had an intimidating presence, tall, with a stern face. The man smirked as he looked Samuel up and down, his eyes calculating. "You really don't know who I am?" the man asked, as though he found Samuel's question amusing. "I'm disappointed, Director Carter." Samuel's stomach turned. The man knew who he was. There was no doubt about that now. But who was he? And why was he doing this? "Why am I here?" Samuel repeated, his voice sharper this time. "What do you want?" The man walked slowly around him, inspecting him like a specimen under a microscope. His footsteps echoed in the small concrete room. "You have something we want, and you're going to help us get it." Samuel frowned, confusion clouding his mind. "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have anything you want." The man stopped behind him and leaned in close. "Oh, you have something. You just don't realize it yet."